Morning in the Yarlington estate didn't begin with sunlight. It began with silence, the heavy, cathedral-like kind that came before footsteps, orders, and the daily storm of wealth performing itself. The mansion breathed like a sleeping animal. Glass ribs catching the faintest hint of dawn. Naomi always arrived before the light. That was the rule. Not written, but understood, like every rule set for people like her. She pushed the service door open with a careful hip, holding a plastic bag of her own food. She never touched the mansion's pantry. Workers weren't supposed to use the family's things, even though there was enough to feed 50 households. She set her bag on the counter, tied her hair back, and tied it again when a curl escaped. She was always fixing things: hair, rooms, broken tension. Routine gave her peace. Routine gave her control. Her grandmother used to say, "When the world is cruel, make your corner gentle." So Naomi did. She cleaned the marble floors, careful not to breathe too deeply when bleach stung her eyes. She arranged the white roses on the dining table. Mrs. Yarlington insisted on fresh ones daily, even when she wasn't home to see them. She dusted the library, running a cloth over the portraits no one ever looked at. She paused at one painting, a stern man, jaw hard enough to cut glass, eyes cold enough to freeze. Oceans. She never knew why that particular portrait made her chest tighten. She didn't see the figure in the doorway watching her. He did. Elias. Yarlington. 30-7 years old. The kind of billionaire who made formality feel like a threat. A man who inherited wealth and multiplied it through ruthless efficiency, firing without blinking, cutting corners others cried about, reshaping entire communities without caring. Who fell through the cracks? People said money made him. Cold. They were wrong. Elias was cold, long before the money. He watched Naomi dust the portrait, his father's portrait, with an unexplainable tightness in his jaw. Something about the gentleness in her movements irritated him, as though she was handling something fragile he didn't believe existed. Of course she felt his stare. No one survived in a house like this without sensing danger. Naomi straightened. "Good morning, sir." Her voice was soft, not timid, but measured. He hated measured. Measured reminded him of people who hid things. "You're early," Elias said, as if early were a crime. "I always am, sir." He hated that. Predictable kindness made him uncomfortable. He stepped into the room, his presence like a temperature drop. "Don't touch that frame again." Her brows pinched. "Is something wrong with it? It's sentimental value," he snapped. But that wasn't true. He despised the man in the painting. He despised everything the man left behind. He turned sharply and left her in. The cold draft of his wake. Naomi exhaled, not fearfully, just steadily. She had worked for cruel people before. She had learned to let disrespect fall off her like dust. Still, something bothered her. She wiped the frame once more, gently, almost apologetically. The morning went on like any other. Naomi carried laundry to the guest wing, humming under her breath. Music made chores lighter, and the walls here were thick enough that no one usually heard. She passed the partially open door to Elias's office. Inside. He was on a call, voice low, irritated. "No, I don't care what the lawyers say. The documents were supposed to be sealed. If something leaked, no. Listen to me, listen. If anything connects back to the old man, it complicates everything. I don't need complications." Naomi slowed her steps. The old man, the portrait man. Her fingers tightened around the laundry basket, not in curiosity, but in the instinctive fear of hearing things never meant for her. She stepped away, quietly, but her absence wasn't quiet enough. Elias's voice cut through the hallway. "You, Maid." Naomi froze. He ended his call without a goodbye. The air felt thick enough to choke. "Were you listening?" "No, sir," she said honestly. "I was just passing by." Then walked quieter. She said nothing. He stepped closer. Too close. People who overhear things in this house often imagine themselves more important than they are. I never imagined that, she replied, calm, grounded. To grounded, that rattled him. His father used to speak like that, steady, unbothered, unaffected. Elias had grown up clenching his fists beneath dinner tables, just to feel something other than humiliation. He stepped back sharply, as if burned. Get back to work. She left, heart beating faster than her footsteps stopped by noon. Sunlight finally broke over the estate, thin, winter light that barely warmed the glass. Naomi took the linens to the backyard clothes line, preferring natural air to the mansion's industrial dryers. Her fingers ached from the cold, but she breathed easier outside. She didn't know that Elias stood by the upstairs window, watching her again. There was something about the way she moved, quiet resilience, familiar somehow, that made something old and unwanted stir in him. He hated that feeling. He hated familiarity emerging from someone so far beneath his world. Then something strange happened. Naomi pulled a small envelope from her pocket, hesitated, and tucked it deeper into her coat. She looked around, not fearfully, but cautiously, before hanging the last sheet. Elias's eyes narrowed. An envelope? Hidden. His mind snapped into suspicion as easily as breathing. Naomi walked back toward the house, unaware that Elias had already left the window, unaware that he was now moving silently down the hall, taking the back staircase, following the route she always took after laundry, unaware that the simple act of tucking away that envelope had just changed the entire trajectory of her life. Naomi entered the staff corridor, heading for her locker. Elias followed. Silent. Predatory. Unblinking. She opened her locker, reached inside her coat pocket and froze. The envelope was gone. She looked around, startled. Confused. Her hands patted her coat, her apron, her pockets again, but the envelope was no longer there. Elias watched from the shadowed end of the hallway, the small ivory envelope in his hand, his expression unreadable. He turned it over. There was handwriting on the front, a name, her surname. And below it, the name of his father. His blood turned to ice. The same wound, the same man. The past he buried was no longer buried. As Naomi stood trembling, realizing something precious was missing, Elias slipped the envelope into his coat and stepped back into the shadows. The storm had begun. Naomi spent the rest of the afternoon pretending her hands were steady. They weren't. A missing envelope would mean nothing to anyone else, but to her, it was everything. It was the only thing she'd carried for years, folded, creased, soft at the edges like something loved to heart. She had promised her grandmother she would keep it safe. She had promised herself she would never open it until she felt strong enough to face whatever truth lived inside. And now it was gone. She checked her locker 3 times, checked the laundry basket, checked the hallway like someone had dropped it on the way. Nothing. She pressed a trembling hand against the cold metal door. It wasn't the envelope itself that terrified her. It was the name written on it. It didn't belong to her. It belonged to someone else. Someone she had spent her whole life not knowing, and now someone inside this house had it. Downstairs in his private lounge, Elias turned the envelope over and over again between his fingers, like it was a weapon he hadn't yet decided how to use. The handwriting was unmistakable, the sharp slanted letters of his father's signature style. He had spent years forging it on school notes and letters home, just to keep teachers from calling a man who never answered anyway. His father writing to a maid. To this maid? Impossible. Unthinkable. Infuriating. He slammed the envelope onto the bar counter hard enough to make the crystal decanter tremble. The housekeeper, Mrs. Keene, flinched from across the room. Mr. Yarlington? Out! He snapped. Now, she scurried out as though pushed by the cold wind of his temper. Elias stared at the envelope again, jaw tight. There was no logical explanation, not yet. But logic was already losing ground to something older. An instinct he had spent his entire life trying to overpower. Recognition. Not of the envelope, not of the handwriting, of the girl, Something about Naomi's face, her eyes, the way she held her body like she had learned to take up less space long before entering his house. Something about her reminded him of no. He refused the thought before it fully formed. He tore himself away from the counter. There was only one way to get answers, and he would ask her himself. Naomi folded towels in the linen room, trying to keep her breathing even. The scent of detergent was comforting, familiar, but her reflection in the metal cabinet door showed eyes wide with worry. She didn't hear Elias enter. She felt his presence first, the air tightening behind her like a fist. She turned. He held up the envelope between two fingers, every drop of blood drained from her face. Looking for this? Her throat closed. Where did you? You dropped it. He lied coolly. She knew he was lying. He knew she knew, but she didn't dare correct him. Her fingers reached out instinctively. He pulled it back before she could touch it. What is this? He asked. It's personal. He tilted his head, studying her like she was a puzzle with one wrong piece. Everything in my house concerns me. It's not about you, sir. His expression flickered, just barely, a small crack in the surface. Then why? He said, each word clipped with suspicion. Is my father's name on it? Her breath caught. She hadn't known he'd seen that. She looked down at the floor as if it could swallow her. I don't know, she whispered. It was given to me after he passed. My grandmother said it was important. She told me to keep it safe. For what purpose? I don't know, she repeated, voice cracking under the pressure. I never opened it. He stepped closer. She backed up until the cabinet pressed against her spine. You expect me to believe, he said softly, that you've kept a sealed letter from my father for years without reading it? Yes. His eyes narrowed. He didn't understand that kind of restraint. He didn't understand choosing honor over curiosity, or humility over power. In this house, he said, everyone lies to protect themselves. She met his gaze, and for the first time, she didn't look away. I'm not everyone. That hit him deeper than she knew, because his father had once said the same words. I'm not everyone. Elias, that's why people bend or break in front of me. Elias felt a familiar rage curl in his stomach. The old man's ghost was alive and well, in portraits, in memories, and now, inexplicably, in a letter held by a maid who should have meant nothing. Get back to work, he said sharply, thrusting the envelope against her chest. She caught it clumsily, holding it like something fragile, something treasured. But as Elias turned to leave, he paused in the doorway, eyes narrowing at the small tremor in her hands. Something was wrong here, something bigger than a letter, and he wasn't leaving it alone. Dinner that night was an event. The quarterly Yarlington Foundation Board meeting. Wealthy guests arrived in tailored coats, stepping over the carpet like it existed solely for them. Staff rushed around the dining room, polishing glasses, arranging plates, lighting candles. Naomi worked silently, keeping her head down. She didn't want attention. Tonight, not with the envelope, burning a hole in her pocket. But attention came. Anyway, Mrs. Keene barked at her for moving too slowly. A board member sneered when she accidentally reached across his view. Another snapped his fingers at her, like she was a dog. Naomi took it all. Not because she lacked strength, but because survival sometimes meant swallowing pride. Elias sat at the far end of the table, watching her without seeming to watch at all. He saw every slight, every disrespect, every moment where she shrank to avoid conflict, and something about it twisted inside him. Not sympathy. Something closer to recognition. Midway through the evening, Naomi accidentally bumped into a waiter, sending a spoon clattering to the floor. The room went silent. Mrs. Keene hissed. Apologized to the guests now. It was my fault, Naomi said softly. I should have been more careful. She stopped, because Elias stood abruptly. His chair scraped the marble louder than the falling spoon. All eyes turned to him. He didn't look at them. He looked at her, and his expression wasn't anger, it was suspicion. What? He said, voice low and dangerous. Is in that envelope that makes you this distracted? Her breath hitched. I told you. It's personal. He stepped closer. Then open it. The room gasped. Naomi's fingers tightened around the envelope. She stepped back. I can't. You will, he ordered. She shook her head, terrified. It wasn't meant for anyone else's eyes. It has my father's name. His voice dropped to a whisper only she could hear. That means it belongs to me. She looked around a room of wealthy faces hungry for scandal, hungry for entertainment at her expense. Her heart pounded. She clutched the envelope to her chest and whispered, I won't open it. Not here. Not in front of them. A silence fell so cold the candles seemed to flicker out of fear. Elias leaned closer. Then I'll open it. Myself. And he reached out, not for her hand, for the envelope. Naomi stumbled backward right into a tray of glassware. Crystal shattered across the floor. Gasps filled the room, and the envelope flew from her grip, landing at the feet of a board member, who looked down, saw the surname of Elias's father on the envelope, and went pale, white as bone. He lifted his head, eyes trembling, and whispered, Elias, she shouldn't have that. That letter was destroyed years ago. Naomi froze. Elias's blood ran cold. The room held its breath, because if the letter was supposed to be destroyed, then why did Naomi have it? And what truth had survived that someone desperately wanted gone? The letter was meant to be destroyed, yet Naomi has it. Silence crashed over the dining room like a fallen chandelier, glittering, sharp, and dangerous. The envelope lay at the feet of the trembling board member, its ivory surface glowing under the chandelier lights like a forbidden relic. Naomi stared at it, breath shallow. Elias stared at the man who'd spoken. The guests stared at both of them, hungry, fearful, electrified. The board member finally looked up, face ghost pale. Elias, I was at the reading of your father's estate. That letter, his voice cracked. That letter was supposed to be burned. A ripple of fear passed across the table, not surprise. Fear. Naomi felt the hairs on her arms rise. Someone in this room knew exactly what the letter meant, and had hoped it was gone forever. Elias stepped forward slowly, shoes crunching broken glass. How would you know that? He asked. The board member swallowed. Your father ordered it. He said the letter represented an unfinished mistake, something that should never resurface. Naomi's stomach dropped. An unfinished mistake. The words felt poisonous. Elias crouched, lifted the envelope from the floor, and brushed off a shard of crystal. The silence in the room became unbearable. Dinner is over, he said flatly. Leave. His voice was calm, but the kind of calm that preceded storms. Chairs scraped, whispers erupted, and soon only two people remained, Naomi. And Elias. The envelope dangled from his fingers. You, he said without looking up. Follow me. Naomi walked several steps behind him through the mansion's echoing hallways. The letter felt heavy in his hand, heavier than the marble walls, heavier than the chandelier above them. Her voice trembled. Sir, I didn't mean to cause trouble. You didn't cause trouble, he said. She blinked. He'd never said anything like that to her. You exposed it. They stopped outside his private office. He opened the door and gestured for her to enter. She did, though every instinct screamed she should run. Elias closed the door behind them with a quiet click. The sound was scarier than a slam. The office smelled of cedar and cold air. Bookshelves towered on each wall like judges. The portrait of his father hung above the fireplace, watching everything. Naomi stood in the center of the room, hands clasped tightly. Elias walked around her slowly, like circling truth itself. How did you get this letter? He asked. My grandmother gave it to me when I was 12, Naomi said. She said it was from someone connected to my past, and you never opened it. No. Why? Her voice softened. Because she told me. Truth hurts more when you go looking for it too soon. That line hit him like a memory he tried to suffocate. His father used to say the same thing, almost word for word. Elias turned away sharply. Sit. Naomi obeyed. Sinking into a chair, he stood across from her, hands braced on the back of another chair. Do you know who my father was? I know he was wealthy, Naomi whispered, and strict. Strict is a polite word for cruel. She met his eyes, gently but honestly. You speak of him the way some people speak of their abusers. The muscles in his jaw twitched. Don't pretend to understand him. I'm not pretending. A beat of silence. She held his gaze, not challenging, not defiant, just steady. And for a fleeting moment, Elias felt that same disturbing familiarity again. He sat opposite her, the envelope between them like a live wire. He slid it across the desk. Open it. Her chest tightened. I am not ready. Then I'll do it. He reached for it. She covered the envelope with both hands. No. The word was soft, but final. Elias leaned back slowly. You're protecting something you haven't even read. I'm protecting the last promise I made to my grandmother. Silence pressed between them for the first time all night. Elias looked away first. A sudden knock shattered the tension. Elias stiffened. Who is it? The door opened without permission. The butler, Mr. Hamill, stepped in, face grim. His eyes flickered to Naomi in a way that made her skin crawl. Sir, Hamill said quietly. A car is idling at the end of the service drive. Same one from last week. Elias's expression darkened. You're sure? Yes, sir. Elias stood abruptly. Naomi, stay here. Hamill raised a brow. Should she? Elias's voice cut like a blade. Yes. The butler bowed slightly and left, but not before giving Naomi a look, the kind that said you don't belong here, and you won't survive here. When the door shut, Naomi whispered, What's going on? Elias loosened his tie with a sharp motion. Nothing you need to worry about. But his eyes said otherwise. He strode toward the door. Naomi stood. Sir, wait. He paused. Her voice dropped to a whisper. Are we in danger? Elias looked at her for a long moment. Then, with an honesty that surprised even him, he said, Not we? He opened the door. Just you. And he walked out. Naomi's knees almost buckled. Why only her? What danger did he see circling her? What did he know that she didn't? She turned her gaze to the envelope on the desk. Her hands shook. Whatever truth lived inside it was already spilling into reality. Knocking on doors, arriving in cars that idled at night. Naomi sat back down and exhaled, telling herself not to panic. That's when she heard it. A soft scrape. Glass shifting. She turned. The window behind. The desk was slightly open. Just an inch, but enough to let in a chill that didn't belong. Naomi walked toward it slowly. The night was black beyond the glass. No stars, no sound, no movement. She leaned closer and jumped as a low voice whispered from the darkness, Stop digging. Her breath froze in her throat. Who's there? She whispered back, terrified. A hand appeared in the darkness, just a silhouette, resting on the WINDOWSILL. The voice came again, urgent and cold. Stop digging, or people will get hurt. Naomi stumbled back, heart slamming. Footsteps thundered down the hall outside. Elias burst into the room. What happened? Naomi pointed at the window, trembling. Someone was there. They spoke to me. Elias ran to the window, yanked it open. Scanned the grounds. Nothing. No footsteps. No shadow. No sign of a person. Just darkness stretching forever. He shut the window hard. Then he turned toward her, not angry, but deadly serious. Naomi, he said quietly, you need to tell me the truth. I have. Then we're in more danger than I realized. Her voice trembled. Why? Elias stepped close. Too close. The fear on his face wasn't the kind a man like him showed lightly. Because, he said, someone else knows what's in that letter. Someone who shouldn't. Naomi's breath hitched, and they want it buried. A beat. A chilling, weighted beat. Elias looked at her with something new in his eyes, not cruelty. Not disdain, but a dawning understanding that terrified him. "Naomi," he whispered, "whoever your grandmother was trying to protect. It wasn't herself." Naomi swallowed hard. "Then who?" Elias stared into her eyes, and for the first time, she saw fear in his. "You." A cold dread washed over her spine. Before she could speak, a loud crash echoed from somewhere deep inside the mansion. Glass. Metal. Something falling. Then dash footsteps. Running. A scream. Naomi gasped. Elias grabbed her arm. "Stay." "Behind me." They ran into the hallway, breathless. But the mansion lights flickered once, twice, then went out completely, plunging them both into darkness. The mansion is plunged into darkness as someone infiltrates the estate, and thereafter the truth Naomi carries. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the mansion still held the echo of it, a kind of damp heaviness that clung to the doors and curled beneath the carpets. You could feel it the moment Ava stepped into the East Wing, a place no maid was ever supposed to enter unless explicitly ordered. The Billionaire's rules were absolute, and the East Wing was the most sacred of them. But tonight, something stronger than fear pulled her here. Curiosity mixed with dread, and that quiet, instinctive certainty that whatever answers the mansion was hiding lived in this corridor. Ava wiped her palms on her apron as she walked deeper, her breath barely audible. The hallway lights flickered with a faint golden tremor, revealing massive portraits on either wall, rich, oil-painted faces of dead kings of business. Every generation of the Billionaire's family looked down with cold, sculpted eyes. Men carved by legacy. Men carved by cruelty. She slowed at each painting, studying them with a tight chest. Every face shared a similar bone structure, lean, severe features, a gaze like sharpened glass. Even in their painted forms, they radiated dominance, but she wasn't searching for them. She was searching for the man whose fragments lived. Inside her memories, the older man from the photograph she found half buried behind a drawer in the pantry. The man who looked nothing like the billionaire, yet somehow carried warmth in his smile. Ava whispered to herself, why was his picture here? And why was someone hiding it? At the very end of the hallway, a pair of double doors waited, dark mahogany, carved with impossible detail. She recognized them instantly. Every maid did. These were the doors leading to the late patriarch's private study, a place sealed since the day the billionaire returned from his father's funeral. Ava touched the brass handle gently. It was warm. Someone had been here recently. Her heart thudded against her ribs, but she pushed the door open anyway. The room breathed dust and silence. Heavy curtains smothered the windows, letting in only a thin blade of moonlight. Books towered on shelves like sleeping giants. The air smelled old cedar wood, parchment, and the faint trace of someone's cologne. She stepped inside, closing the door behind her. A desk dominated the room, its surface scattered with artifacts left untouched since the patriarch's death. A cracked fountain pen, a rusted key, a leather-bound ledger with a broken clasp, but none of it mattered, because on the far wall hidden behind a thin veil of cobweb hung a massive portrait. And Ava froze. It was her. Her breath stopped. Her knees weakened, and she reached out a trembling hand as if the painted version of herself might step forward and answer everything. No. Not exactly her, but the girl in the painting. She was unmistakably Ava's face, younger, dressed in clothes from maybe 25 or 30 years ago, smiling with a softness Ava had lost long ago. Her stomach twisted. This wasn't coincidence. Couldn't be. Her mind raced. Was this an ancestor? Did she resemble someone important from the mansion's past? Or was the truth darker, something tied to the billionaire's obsession with control? A sudden creak in the far corner made her whirl around. Her pulse slammed. A silhouette, tall, broad, moved out from behind the bookcase. Ava's breath shook. But the figure didn't belong to the billionaire. It was the house's oldest caretaker, Mr. Holden, a man with a limp as old as the marble in the hallways. His face wore deep frown lines, but his eyes tonight held something different. Fear. Raw fear. Ava, he whispered sharply, stepping toward her. You shouldn't be here. She swallowed hard. Why is this portrait here? Who is she? Holden breathed heavily, looking at the painting as though it were a ghost risen to confront him. That, he rasped, is a girl the family tried to forget. Ava's skin prickled. Why do I look like her? Holden's mouth quivered as if fighting words he'd been sworn never to speak. There are things about this house, about him, that you don't understand. You're not answering me, she insisted, voice breaking with frustration and fear. Was she related to me? Holden closed his eyes. When he opened them, something in him had crumbled. Child, he whispered, some wounds don't fade with time. They pass from one generation to the next. A chill slid down Ava's spine. Tell me the truth, she pleaded. Holden's hands trembled as he reached into his coat and pulled out a folded yellowed envelope. The edges were brittle, like they might turn to dust in her fingers. He placed it in her palm. This belonged to him, Holden said. To the old master. He asked me to burn it after he died, but I couldn't, because I knew one day someone would return, someone who deserved answers. Ava's heart jumped. Return? I've never been here before. Holden gave her a grief-stricken look. Not you, he whispered, but your blood. Her throat tightened. Blood. Identity. Her face in the painting. The patriarch's secret envelope. Her hands shook as she opened it. Inside was a single photograph, aged, faded, the edges eaten by time. The same girl from the painting, standing beside the patriarch. But that wasn't what made her gasp. It was the inscription on the back, written in the patriarch's unmistakable handwriting. For my daughter, the one the world must never claim. Ava dropped the envelope as though it had burned her. Her father, no, impossible. Her mother had never mentioned. Holden grabbed her shoulders. You need to leave the mansion. Tonight, before he finds out, you know. Her pulse hammered. He? You mean the billionaire? Holden nodded once, slow and tragic. He will do anything to protect the lie that built his empire. A small, metallic click echoed behind them. Ava's blood froze. She turned slowly. The billionaire stood in the doorway. Silent. Expression carved from stone. Eyes burning with a cold, precise fury that made the air itself tighten. In his hand the decision between who would leave this room alive. His voice was a low, venomous whisper. I warned you, Ava. This wing is forbidden. The billionaire catches Ava and Holden in this secret study, holding the truth that could destroy him. The morning after the near firing felt unnervingly quiet. Elaine rose before dawn, her hands trembling slightly as she tied her apron. The mansion corridors usually humming with footsteps, voices, and clinking glass lay still. Too still. Even the air felt different, charged with the aftertaste of last night's threat. It was as if the mansion itself was holding its breath, watching her. She shouldn't have come back. Any reasonable person would have quit, walked out, never looked behind. But Elaine had never lived a life where she could simply walk away from a job, especially one that paid enough to help her grandmother's treatments and keep their fragile world from falling apart. Besides, there was the journal. It was tucked beneath her mattress, wrapped into kitchen towels. The faint smell of lemon cleaner still clung to the pages, as if it remembered the world it had been hidden in. She didn't know what to make of the strange initials. E.M. Her initials Elaine. Morgan, written in a book dated years before she'd been born. That detail kept gnawing at her, pulling her back into the mansion even when fear screamed at her to leave today. She told herself she would behave perfectly. No mistakes, no missteps, no curiosity. She needed this job, but she also needed answers. The mansion hums with Leesby mid-morning. Staff began to move with the kind of brittle energy soldiers carry after a battle. No one talked about last night, but everyone felt it. Elaine kept her head down while polishing silver in the dining hall. Voices drifted faintly from the adjoining study, muffled but heated. She recognized one as Victor Hale, the billionaire. The other was male, older, strained. She wasn't supposed to listen, but she couldn't ignore the way Victor hissed. I told you keep her ignorant. She's not ready. Her stomach tightened. Ignorant of what? Not ready for what? The silver tray in her hand trembled. A shadow moved in the doorway. Elaine startled as someone stepped inside. The butler, Mr. Alcott, thin, pale, with eyes that always looked 2 seconds ahead of everyone else. He stared at her longer than necessary. "Are you all right, Miss Morgan? You look faint." "I'm fine," Elaine lied. He didn't blink. "Good. Mr. Hale values staff who know their place." She nodded quickly, but Alcott didn't leave. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. "You weren't supposed to see last night, and you're not supposed to hear the conversation." His gaze sharpened. "Curiosity has undone for stronger people than you." Elaine swallowed, her heart thudding. "I'm not curious." His thin lips curled. "Then survive your day without another." "Mistake." He turned and left as silently as he came. The silver tray in her hands slipped and clattered against the table. Her breath came shallow and fast. Someone else knew she was listening. Someone else was watching her, a glimpse of Hope-Be late afternoon. She found a temporary pocket of safety, the garden terrace. No cameras, no staff, only wind and the rustle of leaves. She needed a moment to breathe. As she arranged fresh flowers in tall crystal vases, she noticed movement at the edge of the terrace. A figure in a grey suit, Victor Hale's private assistant. Daniel. Younger than Victor by about a decade, Daniel carried a calm, composed presence that contrasted sharply with his employer's cold brutality. He approached slowly, as if careful not to startle her. "I heard what happened yesterday," he said softly. Elaine froze. Of course he heard. The staff talked in whispers, but whispers traveled fast. "I'm fine," she managed. "You're not," he replied. No one is fine after being threatened by Victor Hale. His honesty cracked something inside her. She blinked rapidly, forcing tears back. Daniel lowered his voice. "You should be careful. He isn't stable." Elaine looked up sharply. "Why warn me?" Daniel hesitated, then said, "Because I hate seeing decent people crushed under the heel of someone who thinks money makes him untouchable." It was the first genuine kindness she'd received in this mansion. It was also the first time someone acknowledged Victor's cruelty out loud. Elaine felt a warmth of gratitude and an unexpected spark of courage. Maybe she wasn't alone. The evidence she thinks will save her later that evening. Deep inside the laundry room where the hum of machines masked all sound, she decided something reckless. She would confront Victor. Not to challenge him, she wasn't suicidal, but to show him something she'd found earlier that morning. Something that should prove she was trustworthy, loyal, not a threat. While dusting his library shelves, she had found one of Victor's cufflinks hidden behind an old sculpture. Not just any cufflink. This one had a crest engraved on it, the same crest from the mysterious journal. If she returned it, maybe she could appear helpful. Perhaps even earn a little safety. Or, at the very least, prove she wasn't trying to expose anything. She slipped the cufflink into her pocket and moved silently through the mansion toward Victor's private office. Her pulse hammered. With every step she knocked, a cold voice answered. "Enter." The confrontation that turns against her. Victor Hale stood behind his desk. Sleeves rolled, tie loosened, a storm simmering beneath his expression. Papers were scattered, financial statements, property documents, legal letters. He was in the middle of tearing apart someone's life. Elaine stepped in, swallowing her fear. "I found something in the library," she said quietly. "I thought you'd want it back." She placed the cufflink on the edge of his desk. Victor stared at it, then slowly lifted his eyes to her. "What were you doing in that section of the library?" His voice was silk over steel. "Dedusting, sir." He stepped forward. To close. To quiet. "And how, exactly, did you find something hidden behind a sculpture no one touches?" Elaine's throat tightened. It fell when I wiped the shelf. A convenient accident." He circled her like a predator measuring prey. "You took this," he said. "You kept it? You waited?" "No, I was bringing it to you." "You think I'm a fool?" His voice snapped like a whip. Elaine flinched. Victor leaned in, eyes burning with something darker than suspicion, something like recognition, as if he were searching her face for a memory he wasn't ready to accept. "Tell me," he whispered, "who told you about the crest?" "And nobody told me anything," she whispered. Victor grabbed the cufflink, slammed it into his pocket, and hissed, "If you ever set foot in my library again, you won't survive the consequences." Elaine's breath caught. This wasn't a warning, it was a promise. She fled the office, heart pounding, breath shallow, tears blurring her vision. The final blow, the loss of her only Alice, nearly collided with Daniel in the hallway. His eyes widened. Elaine, what happened? You look terrified. I tried to give him something back, something I thought would help, but he thought I stole it. Daniel's jaw clenched. You shouldn't have gone to him alone. I didn't know what else to do. He shook his head, a shadow crossing his face. I can't protect you anymore. I'm sorry. Her chest tightened. What do you mean? Victor thinks you're snooping. And if I intervene now, he'll assume I encouraged you. Daniel stepped back. You're on your own. Stay away from me for your own safety. And just like that, her only ally walked away. Elaine stood in the dim hallway, trembling. One mistake, one misunderstanding, and now she had nothing, no protection, no support, no place in the house where she was safe. But worst of all, she still had no answers. As she cried quietly on the stairwell. Her hand brushed against her apron, pocket empty. The cufflink was gone, but in its place, a folded piece of paper she had never seen before. With shaky hands, she opened it, for words stared back at her in elegant handwriting. You are not wrong. Before she could react, a shadow moved behind her. A breath at her ear whispered, but you are in danger. The mansion was colder than usual that night. The storm outside had returned, wind howling against the windows like the cries of the past. Lightning lit the halls in jagged flashes, revealing cracks in the marble walls and shadows in corners, where no shadow should have been. Elaine moved slowly, each step a heavy thud against the polished floors. She was alone, or so she thought, but the echo of her own breathing felt like a threat. Every corner, every hallway, every flicker of candlelight carried a whisper of danger. She had lost everything. Her only ally, Daniel, had stepped away. Victor Hale's suspicion now hung over her like a guillotine. The envelope, the cufflink, the one thread of hope she'd clung to, they were gone. She pressed her back against the wall of the servant corridor, trying to control her shaking hands. Her mind raced through every step she'd taken, every decision, every small act of curiosity that had led her here. Was it all wrong? Her chest tightened. The familiar knot of despair returned, the one she had felt as a child when her grandmother whispered of secrets too heavy for a girl. She sank to the floor, knees drawn to her chest. I can't do this, she whispered. I can't survive this house. Not like this. Her mind drifted involuntarily to her grandmother's stories, the stories that had seemed quaint, protective, almost foolish when she was younger. Her grandmother had always spoken of a time when justice could be preserved, when truth could survive cruelty. But Elaine had dismissed them as fairy tales. Now, sitting on the cold floor of the mansion she barely understood, she realized how wrong she had been. Everything mattered. Every detail, every hidden object, every whispered word she'd been forced to overhear. And she had missed something. Her eyes fell on a small, chipped stone near the baseboard, a detail she had overlooked a dozen times. Something about it felt deliberate, almost like a marker. She crouched, fingertips tracing its rough surface. There, scratched faintly into the stone, were tiny numbers and letters, B17, EM. Her stomach dropped. Her initials. Her name. Her blood. But what did it mean? It took her several minutes to realize. It was a clue, left deliberately, hidden in plain sight. Her grandmother had been right. The truth wasn't in the obvious places. It never was. Elaine stood slowly, renewed resolve flickering in her chest despite the tremor in her legs. She would follow the clues. She would uncover the truth, even if it killed her. But the mansion wasn't done testing her. She moved toward the east wing, the part of the house she had been warned to avoid. Every step closer made her pulse spike. Every shadow seemed to move, almost conscious in its intent. The hall was stretched endlessly under the storm's intermittent light. She pressed her hand to the wall, seeking the familiarity of the stone marker. There, beneath a portrait of Victor's father, she found a small compartment hidden behind a loose panel in the wall. Her heart leapt. The envelope, the one she thought she had lost, was inside, carefully folded as if waiting for her. With trembling hands, she opened it. Inside was a single photograph, Victor Hale's father young, smiling and holding a small child in his arms. The child's face was blurred slightly, but the features, they were unmistakable. Her face, Elaine staggered back, pressing her palm to her mouth. The realization hit her like a thunderclap. She was the child in the photograph. Somehow, impossibly, her grandmother had hidden her existence from everyone in this house. Even Victor. And yet, there was more. A small note tucked behind the photo read, "She is the key. Protect her. The rest can burn." Elaine's hands shook. The weight of generations pressed down on her. Everything she had thought she understood about her place in the world, about the mansion, about Victor Hale, was wrong. She had been looking at everything the wrong way. Her grandmother's warning, her instinctive caution, the envelope, the cufflink kit all pointed to the same truth. She was central to something far larger than herself, and far more dangerous. The storm's wind tore at the mansion's windows, rattling them violently. Thunder rolled like cannon fire. Elaine pressed the photograph to her chest, the chill of revelation mingling with the cold stone beneath her knees. She realized something terrifying. The danger wasn't just external. Victor Hale was ruthless, yes, but the real danger was the legacy he was protecting. Everything he had built, every secret he had kept, every act of cruelty. It had all been designed to keep her existence hidden, to keep her powerless. Her pulse quickened. She could feel the mansion breathing around her, alive with the weight of secrets. Every room, every hallway, every portrait seemed to watch her now, marking her, judging her. Elaine knew she couldn't trust anyone. Not Daniel, not Holden, not even the fragments of kindness she had glimpsed in the rare moments of truth. She was alone, and she would have to face the storm on her own. A sudden sound shattered the fragile silence's soft click, like metal against marble. Elaine froze, heart hammering. The envelope slipped from her hands and fell to the floor. Footsteps approached. Slow, deliberate. Not Victor's. Someone else. Someone who had been moving silently through the mansion for hours, watching, waiting. A voice whispered from the shadows, barely audible over the storm, "You're closer than you think. But they're coming for you." Elaine's breath caught. She pressed herself against the wall, chest rising and falling rapidly. The photograph trembled in her hands. Lightning flashed. In that split second of illumination, she saw a figure at the end of the hallway, tall, hooded, unrecognizable. And yet, there was something familiar about the stance, the weight, the way the figure moved. She tried to speak, but no sound came. Before she could react, the figure vanished into the darkness, leaving only a whisper. "The truth is not what you believe, and your next step may cost everything." Elaine's knees buckled. The photograph slipped to the floor. She sank to the stone, shivering, staring into the shadows. The storm raged outside. The mansion loomed like a cage, and she had no idea which way was safe. Elaine discovers that her existence is central to a hidden family legacy, but a shadowy figure signals that pursuing the truth could cost her life. Elaine barely slept that night. The photograph of the patriarch holding a child lay beside her on the cot. In the servant quarters, a silent accusation. Every creak of the mansion, every gust of wind rattling the shutters, felt like a footstep creeping closer. She had survived Victor Hale's rage, Daniel's withdrawal, and Holden's cryptic warnings. But survival didn't feel like safety. Not when the mansion itself seemed to breathe in anticipation of her next misstep. By dawn, she had made a decision. She would not wait for the truth to be revealed to her. She would unearth it herself. A careful strategy. Elaine moved with calculated caution, tracing the paths she had walked hundreds of times, but now viewed with fresh suspicion. Every shadow could be hiding someone watching, listening. Every hallway could be a trap. Her first stop was Holden's quarters. The old caretaker had been cryptic, but Elaine hoped he would finally offer clarity. She found him in the small library he always retreated to in the early hours, hunched over a stack of ancient documents. "Holden," she whispered. He looked up slowly, eyes shadowed with worry. "Elaine, you should not be here." "I can't wait," She said, "I need to know everything about me, about the patriarch, about why Victor Hale is protecting or hiding this from me." Holden's gaze softened, then hardened. "What you seek will change everything you believe. And some things will hurt you more than you imagine." Elaine's jaw tightened. "I'm ready." He studied her for a long moment, then reached under the table, pulling out a thick envelope marked with the patriarch's seal. "This contains the records I've been keeping for years," he said. "Documents, letters, birth records, everything linking you to the Hale family. Your grandmother entrusted me with it. Now it belongs to you." Her hands shook as she took the envelope. "This is everything?" she asked. "Not everything," Holden whispered. "Some secrets cannot be written. Some are only revealed in the presence of the living." She swallowed, understanding the warning. The pieces were here, but she would need more than papers to truly understand the legacy she had inherited, shifting. Ali insisted she was leaving. Holden pulled her back by the sleeve. "Be careful who you trust. Daniel's loyalty is complicated. And Victor Hale, he is not the only danger in this house." Elaine frowned. "What do you mean?" Holden leaned closer. "You've glimpsed his wrath. But there are others who have watched this family for generations, waiting for an opportunity. Some will help you. Some will betray you. You must learn to distinguish between them before it's too late." Elaine nodded, digesting the weight of his words. Every ally she had counted on now seemed fragile, unreliable. Confronting the billionaire be late morning. Elaine knew she had to confront Victor Hale not with aggression, but with evidence. She needed to test his reactions, to see if he truly understood who she was and what she represented. Victor was in his office, reviewing documents. The mansion seemed to shrink round him, the walls pressing in like the echoes of his family's sins. Elaine knocked softly. "Sir, may I speak with you?" Victor didn't respond immediately. When he finally looked up, his gaze fixed on her with unnerving intensity. "You again," he said. His voice was calm but carried the weight of a man who rarely lost control. "What is it now?" "I have something for you," Elaine said, pulling the patriarch's photograph from her coat. She placed it on his desk. Victor's eyes flicked to it. His lips pressed into a thin line. "Where did you find this?" "In the East Wing," she said. "It was hidden behind a panel in the wall. Holden told me to look for it. For a fraction of a second." The billionaire's carefully constructed mask cracked. Recognition, fear, and something unidentifiable flashed across his face. "You shouldn't have seen that," he said. Elaine's heart raced. "Why?" "It's the truth. It proves something you've tried to hide." Victor leaned back, studying her. "The truth is dangerous," he said softly, "and some truths are meant to remain buried. For the protection of those involved." Elaine stared at him. "Protection? Or control?" The line was impossibly blurred. The first signs of fracture Victor Hale's composure began to slip in subtle ways. A twitch in his jaw, a hand clenching the desk edge. His voice, calm on the surface, carried undercurrents of panic he could not fully suppress. Elaine noted every detail, every subtle tell, every hint of vulnerability. "He's human," she whispered to herself. "And every human has a weakness," and she had the key to his. The shocking revelation Holden had warned her that not all secrets could be written. Elaine realized now that the patriarch's legacy was not just about inheritance, lineage, or letters. It was about choices made to protect or manipulate the next generation. As she continued her silent observation of Victor, she noticed a small, almost imperceptible mark on the desk, a faint engraving of initials she didn't recognize. She crouched to inspect it. It matched the handwriting on one of the letters she had seen earlier. But it wasn't Victor's father's, it was Daniel's. Her pulse raced. Daniel, the seemingly loyal assistant who had warned her, who had shown her kindness, might not be entirely on her side. And if Daniel was compromised, she had no one. The emotional toll. Elaine's mind raced with the implications. Every ally could be a threat. Every shadow in the mansion could conceal someone waiting to exploit her. She was alone, surrounded by walls that had absorbed generations of secrets and lies. She sank into a chair near the office window, staring out at the sprawling estate. Rain fell in sheets now, as if the heavens themselves were mourning the tangled history of the Hale family. Her chest ached. Her hands trembled. She had discovered a part of the truth, but that partial revelation was both a gift and a curse, because partial truths can be the most dangerous. They offer hope, but they can also blind you to the full scale of betrayal. As Elaine sat shivering, Victor Hale's voice came from behind her, low, deliberate, and unmistakably dangerous. You think you've uncovered the truth, but you've only seen what I want you to see. There's someone in this house who has known the real secret all along, and they are watching you right now. A sudden movement in the shadows caught her eye. A familiar figure stepped forward, calm and deliberate, and then whispered, almost chillingly, "Elaine, it's time you met the real villain." The grand hall of the Hale estate was empty, at least. It should have been. Candles flickered along the ornate walls, casting long shadows that danced like ghosts of the past. Outside, the storm had finally settled into a steady rain, the kind that drummed against windows with relentless persistence. Elaine stood near the center of the hall, clutching the photograph and the patriarch's letters to her chest. Her legs trembled, not from fear this time, but from the weight of what she was about to do. Victor Hale had demanded she leave the East Wing, warned her to stay silent, tried to manipulate her into submission, but she had discovered the fragments of truth, and now she was ready to expose them. The gathering Donnell, who had once withdrawn his protection, appeared silently beside her. His expression was unreadable, but his eyes reflected a storm of emotions: guilt, fear, and perhaps a glimmer of loyalty. "Are you certain about this?" he whispered. Elaine nodded. "I don't have a choice. If I don't reveal the truth, someone else will be hurt, and I can't let that happen." Daniel swallowed. "Then let's make sure you're prepared for the fallout." They moved together toward the hall's center, where the tall windows opened onto the courtyard. Outside, staff and a few members of the extended Hale family had gathered, curious, tense, waiting. Word of Elaine's confrontation with Victor had spread faster than she could have imagined. From the shadows, Holden appeared. His face was lined with worry, but his eyes held quiet approval. "You're ready," he said simply. "Everything else is out of your hands." The public revelation. Elaine stepped forward, holding the photograph high so that it caught the candle light. Silence fell. All eyes turned toward her. "This," she began, her voice trembling but growing steadier with each word, "is the photograph of the patriarch, Victor Hale's father, holding a child he hid from the world. That child is me." A collective gasp swept through the hall. Victor Hale stepped forward, jaw tight, eyes like steel. "Elaine," he said, his voice low and controlled, "you don't understand what you're saying." I understand perfectly," Elaine interrupted. "You spent years hiding the truth about me, about my existence, about the family legacy. You tried to erase me to protect your empire. But the truth can't be hidden any longer." She carefully laid out the patriarch's letters and the photograph on the long oak table. In the center of the room, every eye in the hall followed her hands as she revealed the contents: birth records, hidden letters, and documentation of the lineage that traced back to the patriarch himself. "The patriarch made choices to protect me," Elaine continued, her voice growing stronger. "Choices that required deception, yes, but he also left a trail that I found." Her gaze met Victor's. "I am the reason your empire was built on secrets, and I am here to demand the truth, not revenge." The shocking twist room fell into tense silence, and then from the far corner a soft voice spoke. Not entirely. All heads turned. A figure emerged from the shadows, a cousin of Victor's, one long thought loyal and obscure. They held a small folder in their hand, the seal unmistakable. "I've known about this for years," the cousin admitted. "Everything Elaine has discovered. It was the surface. The deeper truth is even more complicated." Elaine's stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" The cousin opened the folder, revealing a letter written in the patriarch's hand. Victor's eyes widened slightly. The first crack in his forehead, the letter read, "Victor, protect the empire, but beware the one who carries my blood. She must never be harmed. She holds the key to everything. And if you fail, the consequences will reach beyond this family." Elaine felt her knees weaken. The patriarch hadn't just hidden her, he had entrusted her with the responsibility of the family's legacy. Victor's face darkened, a mixture of fury and resignation. You were meant to remain hidden," he whispered. "I was never hidden by choice," Elaine said, stepping closer. "And now the truth is in the open." Emotional catharsis. The room was tense, silent except for the occasional rustle of paper and the crackle of candle flames. Staff, family members, and distant relatives all watched Elaine with a mix of awe, confusion, and disbelief. Daniel stepped forward, placing a hand briefly on her shoulder. "You've done what no one else could," he murmured. Elaine exhaled deeply. She felt the tightness in her chest loosen slightly. Years of fear, confusion, and hidden truths had brought her here, to this moment of revelation. She had confronted the most powerful man in the mansion and stood unbroken. Even Victor Hale seemed diminished under the weight of the revelation. He was still ruthless, still dangerous, but the control he wielded over the mansion, over everyone, was fractured. And Elaine realized something profound. The patriarch had left her not just a secret, but the chance to shape the future. The unexpected secret. Before Elaine could process the enormity of the moment, the cousin cleared their throat. "There's one more thing." Elaine looked up, pulse quickening. The cousin handed her a small, sealed envelope. The patriarch left this for the one he trusted to continue his legacy. "Open it, only when you're ready." Her hands shook as she broke the seal. Inside was a single, folded document, a deed to a distant property, a safe deposit box, and a final note. "This house, these secrets, were never mine to take. They belong to the one who carries my blood. Protect it wisely." Elaine's mind reeled. She had not only discovered the truth of her existence, but she had also inherited a responsibility, one that could alter the fate of everyone in the mansion. The moment was almost serene, almost victorious, until a low, metallic click echoed from the hall outside. Elaine and the assembled witnesses turned sharply. The cousin's eyes widened in alarm. Daniel's face tightened. Even Victor Hale tensed. A shadow moved across the doorway, and a voice, unmistakable and chilling, whispered from the darkness, "Congratulations, Elaine. But the real secret has only just begun." Lightning struck outside, illuminating the hall and revealing a figure lurking in the shadows. Someone none of them had expected. Someone whose presence promised that the story was far from over. Elaine's heart pounded. She had uncovered the truth. But now, the danger and the final revelations were only beginning. The mansion had changed overnight, not in walls or decor, but in its atmosphere. Every shadow seemed sharper, every corridor longer, every portrait a silent witness. Elaine could feel the weight of her revelation pressing down on the staff, the family, even Victor Hale himself. The storm had cleared, but the air was thick with tension. Conversations were whispered in corners, footsteps hurried down halls, and eyes darted nervously toward the east wing, the epicenter of the upheaval. Elaine walked through the corridors, letters and photographs carefully tucked into a folder at her side. She was no longer a frightened, powerless maid. She carried proof of her lineage, the patriarch's directives, and the keys to the family legacy. But power came with a price. The community reacted. Staff gathered in the dining hall, hesitant, watching Elaine from the edges of the room. Many had feared Victor for years, bending under his control and silent cruelty. Now they saw cracks in his armor. Holden approached cautiously. "Elaine, be mindful. People may applaud you quietly, but loyalty and fear are not easily disentangled." Elaine nodded. She understood that admiration would not protect her. She needed strategy, observation, and patience. One by one, staff members approached, hesitant smiles breaking across faces. Some offered congratulations. Others muttered relief that the oppressive control of Victor's secrecy had loosened. Elaine felt a surge of hope. Allies were emerging, but the mansion still had its predators. Antagonists. Breakdown. Victor Hale sat in the study, isolated and silent. The billionaire's usual poise had fractured. Papers lay scattered across his desk. His fists rested heavily on the surface as he stared at nothing, lost in the reality that his carefully maintained empire of secrets was crumbling. Daniel observed from the doorway, watching Victor struggle. Elaine had seen this side of the man, now ruthless, yes, but human. Vulnerable, yes, but dangerous. Victor's voice was barely audible as he muttered to himself. She knows. She understands. Everything I built. For nothing. It was a confession as much as a breakdown. Elaine realized then that Victor's obsession with control had not only been about power, but also about fear, the fear that his family's legacy, his father's secrets, and the truth of her existence could dismantle the world he had constructed. Relationships reconfigured, Elaine moved carefully through the halls, aware that each step she took could shift alliances further. Staff members whispered encouragement. Daniel finally stepped forward, placing a hand lightly on her shoulder. I should have stood by you earlier, he admitted, voice low. I was afraid of what Victor might do, but now we must face him together. Elaine's pulse quickened. She realized loyalty could shift with courage, and fear could be replaced by truth. Even some of Victor's distant relatives began to align with her quietly, drawn by the evidence she had revealed, and the charisma of someone confronting injustice with integrity. The choice between vengeance and mercy. Elaine found Victor in the grand hall, pacing with a restless energy. His eyes, cold and calculating, met hers. You've taken everything from me, he said, voice tight with barely contained rage. My secrets, my authority, my control. What do you want? Elaine took a deep breath. For the first time, she felt the weight of the choice before her. Vengeance would have been easy. She could expose him, ruin him entirely, leave him humiliated and powerless. It would satisfy the years of fear, the intimidation, the oppression. But she felt the echo of her grandmother's wisdom. Legacy was more than retribution. Power without purpose could destroy even those with the right to wield it. I want the truth, she said steadily. I want the family to know what happened, and I want this house to be a place of transparency, not fear. But I will not destroy you entirely. That is not what the patriarch wanted. Victor stared, unblinking, his lips pressed into a thin line, measuring her words, testing her resolve. Finally, he exhaled, slow and deliberate. You are stronger than I imagined, he admitted, and perhaps wiser. Elaine knew then that the reckoning was not only about revealing secrets, but also about reshaping the future. Desperate moves Elaine, and Victor reached a tentative understanding. A loud crash echoed from the east wing. Staff rushed toward the sound, but Elaine hesitated. Something about the noise felt different, calculated. She ran toward the source, heart hammering. At the far end of the hall, she found a shadowy figure attempting to access a locked cabinet containing the last of the patriarch's private documents. Elaine froze. The figure turned, revealing a face she recognized, the same mysterious presence from Chapter 6, the one who had whispered warnings from the shadows. But now the figure's intent was clear. They're trying to take everything, she whispered. Victor stepped beside her, a silent acknowledgement that they would face this threat together. The shadow paused, then vanished into a side corridor, leaving behind only a single clue, a folded envelope with Victor's initials, but written in the hand of another. Elaine's eyes widened as she picked up the envelope. She recognized the handwriting immediately. Not everything is as it seems. Trust no one, not even him. Victor's hand rested on the desk behind her. His expression was unreadable. The mansion felt alive, the walls trembling with the weight of unspoken threats. And Elaine realized that even after all she had uncovered, a hidden adversary was still in the house, waiting for the moment to strike, and no one could predict who would survive the reckoning. The mansion was quiet in a way that felt different than before. No storm howled outside, no footsteps echoed in the halls, and the shadows seemed less menacing, though they had not disappeared entirely. Silence had returned, but it was not the fearful silence of suppression, it was the measured calm of a house that had survived upheaval and revealed its truths. Elaine walked slowly through the corridors, her fingers brushing against the polished wood of the banisters. Every corner reminded her of the months she had spent unraveling the mysteries of the Hale estate, the secrets hidden behind walls, the whispers that had haunted her nights. The moments of fear and courage that had defined her life here. She felt the weight of legacy settle on her shoulders. But unlike before, this weight was not oppressive. It was responsibility tempered by knowledge, clarity, and the ability to act with purpose. The reconfigured family Victor Hale sat in the grand study, quietly reviewing the remnants of his father's documents. His face had softened not entirely, but enough that Elaine could see traces of humanity that had been buried under years of control and ruthless ambition. He looked up as she entered. "I don't know if I can ever apologize for the years of fear," he said quietly. Elaine shook her head. "You don't need to apologize. The truth has a way of correcting itself. You've made your choices and I've made mine. That's all that matters now." Outside, the staff moved with renewed confidence. The oppressive tension that had gripped them for years was gone. Some still glanced nervously at Victor, but the balance of power had shifted. Elaine's presence, her courage, had reminded everyone that even in the shadows of fear, integrity could prevail. Daniel approached her, cautious but hopeful. "So, this is the new normal?" Elaine smiled faintly. "It's a start." Healing and connection, Elaine sought out the parts of the mansion she had once avoided, the east wing, the library, even the servant quarters. She found reminders of past kindnesses and betrayals, each one a lesson etched into the walls of the house. Holden met her in the library. "You've done what few could, Elaine. You've faced fear, discovered the truth and survived." She nodded, feeling the deep ache of the journey behind her. "And yet, I still feel like there's more to protect, more to heal." Holden smiled. "That's the nature of legacy. It never ends, it just changes hands. And now, it's yours to shape." Elaine took a deep breath, feeling the weight of her grandmother's wisdom and the patriarch's foresight. She understood finally that power, truth, and responsibility were intertwined. Protecting the legacy meant making choices with care, not vengeance. The final piece in the quiet of her quarters. Elaine placed the patriarch's photograph on the windowsill. She traced the edges with her fingers, remembering the child she had been, the maid she had been forced to appear as, and the woman she had become. The envelope from the shadowy figure remained unopened on her desk. She hesitated, but then smiled faintly. Some truths, she realized, were not meant to be uncovered immediately. Some mysteries retained their power by waiting for the right moment. Victor approached quietly, standing at the doorway. "I still don't understand why you spared me." Elaine's gaze met his. "Because the Empire isn't about you. It's about what comes next. And the next chapter belongs to those who survive the lessons of the past." For the first time, Victor's expression softened entirely. He nodded once, silently acknowledging the truth she had carried and the wisdom she now embodied. The new horizon outside, rain had given way to sunlight. It streamed through the mansion's tall windows, illuminating the hallways and corridors with a soft glow. Elaine stepped onto the terrace and breathed deeply. The mansion had survived storms, secrets, betrayals, and revelations. And now, so had she thought of her grandmother, who had always warned her that courage and integrity were often forged in the quietest moments, in the spaces where no one was watching. She thought of the shadows she had faced, the allies she had gained, and the adversaries she had confronted, and she knew, finally, that life would never be perfect. There would always be challenges, dangers, and secrets to protect, but there would also be triumph, clarity, and hope. Elaine turned toward the mansion, a small smile playing on her lips. She had discovered the truth, faced the reckoning, and stepped into the new normal. And in that moment, she understood something profound. Some battles are not about victory or defeat. They are about becoming the person strong enough to face whatever comes next. The sun glinted off the rain-slicked windows, casting fractured rainbows across the grand hall. Elaine watched, heart steady, mind clear. Truth is never hidden forever. It waits for the brave to see it and for the wise to carry it forward. The mansion breathed around her, a silent testament to resilience, courage, and the enduring power of the human spirit.